Welcome to Lesson 7, Post-Fire Mapping, Remote Sensing Estimates of Fire Severity. Fire can have significant effects on a landscape days, weeks, or years after a fire. Just as an incident command team takes responsibility during a large and complicated active wildfire event, BEAR teams are called in post-fire to determine if fire has created unacceptable risk to human life and safety, property, and critical natural or cultural resources. As the complexity of the active and post-fire environments increases due to increasing fire size, severity, ownership, and jurisdiction, a more consistent approach to mapping and responding to post-fire conditions is needed. GTR 243 was developed to provide a standard so that BEAR teams can produce consistent outputs and best practice recommendations. To begin the process of evaluating post-fire effects, a map is needed shortly after the fire that reflects the effects on the ground, surface, and soil conditions that may affect infiltration, runoff, and erosion potential. This map is used in order to rapidly assess fire effects, identify areas of potential concern, and prioritize initial field reconnaissance. The BEAR response plan is required within 7 days after a fire containment. These images, presented by RSAC, or the Remote Sensing Application Center, in a BARC webinar in 2014, demonstrate the need for immediate mapping and mitigation on large and high-severity fires. The burned area classification methodology and emergency request products were developed in a response to requests for assessment techniques for burn severity at a landscape scale. The BARC map is developed via classification of Landsat imagery and provide a map of the fire severity expressed in categories of high, medium, low, and non-burned areas. This process begins with a calculation of change using pre-fire image and post-fire image. This calculation is known as DNBR. The timing of the images is crucial. They need to be collected from directly before and after the fire to ensure limited variation from seasonal influences. Using DNBR calculations, an initial BARC map is created. This will give the BEAR team a starting place when deciding where to focus attention on data collection and initial post-fire mitigation. This initial BARC map uses general breakpoints for fire severity categories, and just as vegetation changes from place to place, so does vegetation response. It is therefore crucial for the accuracy of the post-fire map that field validation points be collected and used to calibrate the BARC map. In the case of very long-duration fires, such as the Pioneer Fire that you'll be working on again in this lab, pre- and post-fire images are really too far apart to compare. Think about how vegetation can change from June to September. By comparing pre- and post-fire images, we're assuming that the differences between the images are due to the fire. If we compare images from different seasons, there may be many differences that are related to the natural change in vegetation. To combat this, it's common for pre-fire images to be collected from the previous year at around the same time of year as the post-fire image. An additional technique that may be used is to collect a pre-fire image for the first half of the fire and then another for the second half of the fire so that a more accurate comparison of pre- and post-fire vegetation can be made. There are still potential errors with this data, of course, since there are variations in vegetation from year to year, but in general, this has been found to be a better measure of fire severity on the ground. BEAR teams can request BARC maps from the Remote Sensing Application Center. From RSAC, BEAR teams receive a data bundle containing all the pieces needed for burned area analysis. Data is also available to the public from a different website. The main difference between these two data packages is that the public is not given the thresholded values. This was done to limit the possibility of a non-ground truthed map from being released to the public and the media and causing unnecessary and unfounded concern. After the BEAR team has completed their calibration process, they will then package their products and deliver them back to RSAC. These calibrated images will then be made available to the public. During your lab, you'll learn first how to calculate DNBR from Landsat images, and then, with a different data set containing ground truth data points, create a bark map, calibrate the thresholds, and correct for natural features, and package the outputs for delivery to RSAC. In order to better understand this process, we are first going to go into a little more detail on how the initial bark map is created. Landsat satellites have been collecting information about our world since 1972. The purpose of a satellite is defined by its spatial, temporal, and spectral resolution. The spatial resolution of Landsat sensor is 30 by 30 meters, meaning that a 30 by 30 meter area on the ground is averaged into one value. The temporal resolution is 16 days, meaning that every 16 days a new image is acquired for a specific location. Because Landsat 7 and Landsat 8 are opposed to each other by 180 degrees, there's the possibility of a Landsat image every 8 days for a specific location. Spectral resolution will be discussed later in this lesson. Landsat 7 has a sweep broom sensor, which requires a mechanical system to correct for the movement of the sensor. This mechanical system is broken down, causing areas of no data across the image. There's a mask that USGS has provided, but output barks may have no data lines. If RSAC delivers a map with these no data lines, they will try to recreate the map with Landsat 8 data and deliver when it's available. When RSAC is creating bark maps, their main objective is a prompt delivery, and occasionally Landsat imagery is not the most readily available. In those instances, other sensors are used. For this class, we will only be working with Landsat imagery. To explain spectral resolution, let's take a look at the electromagnetic spectrum. Each feature on the Earth emits a unique signal. Much of this information is blocked by the atmosphere, but there are several atmospheric windows that are used to send and receive information from space. Through these windows, satellites can observe distinct signatures on the ground that can determine not only what the object is, but, as in the case of vegetation, what the current condition of the object is. There are several distinct areas along the electromagnetic spectrum that have been found to correspond to different types and conditions of vegetation. Landsat has been especially tuned to, among other things, capture the parts of the electromagnetic spectrum that are most sensitive to vegetation change. This makes it ideally suited to observe the change in an area after a fire. Landsat 8 is relatively new to the scene, and some pretty major adjustments were made to the spectral resolution, namely the addition of a new band, 1, and slight adjustments to the other bands to improve performance and functionality of the sensor. Near-infrared light is largely reflected by healthy green vegetation. That means that near-infrared bands will be very high in areas of healthy green vegetation and low in areas where there is little vegetation. Mid-infrared light is largely reflected by rock and bare soil. That means that mid-infrared bands will be very high in bare, rocky areas with little vegetation and low in areas of healthy green vegetation. Imagery collected over a forest in a pre-fire condition will have very high near-infrared band values and very low mid-infrared band values. Imagery collected over a forest after a fire will have very low near-infrared band values and very high mid-infrared band values. Landsat images are not ready to use right from the satellite. A few steps of image processing are necessary before the Landsat images can be used. These steps include conversion of the digital numbers in the raw image to reflectance values, geometric correction or georeferencing, and in some cases, atmospheric correction. The normalized burn ratio, or NBR, is the calculation of choice to measure vegetation conditions for Landsat imagery. NDVI is an alternative measure of vegetation change that is better suited for the spectral resolution of other sensors or perhaps some vegetation types. NBR is computed by subtracting the reflectance value in Landsat band 5, or near-infrared, from band 7, or shortwave infrared, and then dividing by the sum of bands 5 and 7. Band 5 is selected because of the high reflectance of green vegetation in the near infrared. And Band 7 is selected because of bare soil reflectance highly in this part of the electromagnetic spectrum. The DNBR, or differenced normalized burn ratio, is then calculated by subtracting the pre-fire NBR from the post-fire NBR. It's important to note that there has been a change in the number and location of bands from Landsat 8 from prior Landsat sensors. Much of the literature that talks about NBR refers to using bands 4 and 7, but that refers to the prior configuration of bands and wavelengths on Landsat 4, 5, and 7. It's important to use the correct bands if you'll be doing this type of analysis on other fires. The final goal in the BEAR process is to create a soil burn severity map, which best represents soil and ground conditions. BARC maps are created using DNBR. They consist of values from 0 to 255, which correspond directly to the level of severity. These values are useful in and of themselves, but applying thresholds, unburned, low, moderate, high, is an important step, as each of these classifications has a known meaning as far as impact on the ground and potential consequences post-fire. It is therefore very important to determine accurately where these thresholds lie. A BARC map is delivered to a BEAR team with standard thresholds assigned. 0 to 75 is unburned, 76 to 109 low, 110 to 187 moderate, 188 to 255 is high. And it could be the case that those thresholds are accurate to the conditions on the site. More often than not, though, field verification is needed to identify where those thresholds should be. After this correction process, the image can then be referred to as a soil burn severity map. During field sampling, the severity class is given based on ground cover, surface color and ash depth, soil structure, roots, and soil water repellency. Key and Benson state that there's no need to place samples across an entire burn. Rather, choose accessible areas near roads. We use remote sensing to be able to extrapolate from not-so-remote areas to remote areas, saving time and allowing for more points to be collected. Usually, 50 to 100 plots is sufficient, 10 to 20 per severity class, unless the fire is very large. It's important to collect a variety of burn severities, but also in transition zones. A field value in a transition zone will help calibrate the threshold by determining where the breakpoint value should be. It's now time to view the MTBS webinar and then begin Lab 7, where you will first download Landsat 8 data, calculate DNBR, and then create a BARC map.